The judges thought they had seen everything, but what happened that night left the entire auditorium frozen in silence. And when Simon leaned forward, eyes wide, completely speechless for the first time in years, everyone knew this wasn't just another audition. This was history. Stay with me until the very end, because this story will remind you why second chances exist, and why no dream ever truly dies. And if stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because moments like these deserve to be shared with the world. 5 years earlier, a shy 19-year-old from Cebu, Philippines walked onto the stage of America's biggest talent show. He introduced himself simply as Miguel Reyes. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't his name, it was his style. His jet black hair was slicked back into a perfect pompadour. He wore a white rhinestone jumpsuit inspired by Elvis Presley, complete with a wide belt and confident stance. The audience giggled. Some whispered. The judges exchanged skeptical looks. Even Simon Cowell raised one eyebrow. Miguel explained in soft, slightly trembling English that he grew up listening to Elvis with his father, a jeepney driver who saved coins just to buy old vinyl records. My papa said music doesn't need language, Miguel had said back then. It only needs heart. But that night, nerves got the better of him. His voice shook. He forgot a verse. The crowd's excitement faded into uncomfortable silence. When the final note cracked, the dream cracked with it. Simon had said gently but honestly, "You've got passion, but passion isn't enough." 3 red XS lit up. Miguel nodded, forced a smile, and walked off stage fighting tears he refused to let fall on camera. Back home in Cebu, the video went viral, but not in the way he hoped. Clips were edited with laughing emojis. Comments mocked his accent, his outfit, his ambition. "Stick to karaoke," one wrote. "You're not Elvis," another said. For months, Miguel avoided mirrors. The jumpsuit was folded and placed in a box under his bed. He stopped singing in public. He even considered quitting music altogether. But life has a strange way of testing the people who are meant for something greater. Miguel's father fell ill the following year. Hospital bills piled up. The jeepney stopped running. Miguel took night shifts at a small hotel, cleaning rooms, and carrying luggage. Every evening after work, exhausted and alone, he would sit by the shoreline and hum softly to the waves. Not for fame. Not for applause. Just to feel close to his father again. One night, his father called him to his bedside. His once strong voice was barely above a whisper. "Anik," he said, "why did you stop singing?" Miguel tried to smile. "It wasn't meant for me, Papa." His father shook his head weakly. "Dreams don't embarrass us. Fear does. Go back. Show them who you are." 3 months later, his father passed away. Grief can break a person. Or it can rebuild them. Miguel chose the second. For the next 4 years, he trained relentlessly. Vocal coaches. English lessons. Stage performance workshops. He performed at weddings, fiestas, small cruise ships, anywhere that would give him a microphone. He studied not just Elvis, but the soul behind the music. He learned to breathe through nerves. To own silence instead of fear it. The jumpsuit came back out of the box, but this time, it was altered, redesigned, modernized. It wasn't a costume anymore. It was a tribute. Then came the announcement. Returning contestants were invited back for a special redemption season of America's biggest stage, America's Got Talent. Miguel applied. Months later, he found himself backstage again. This time, 24 years old. Taller in spirit. Stronger in voice. Still nervous, but no longer fragile. When he walked onto the stage, the crowd didn't recognize him at first. The lights dimmed. A single spotlight followed him to center stage. His hair was slicked back again, but more refined. His white suit shimmered under the lights, subtle gold detailing catching every movement. Simon squinted. "Have we met before?" Miguel smiled softly. "Yes, sir. 5 years ago." The audience gasped as the old audition clip flashed briefly on the big screen. The shaky voice. The red XS. Simon leaned back slowly. Well, this should be interesting. Miguel closed his eyes. And then the music started. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was raw. The first note rolled out of him like thunder across calm water. Deep. Controlled. Emotional. The auditorium shifted. Whispers turned into silence. His voice didn't imitate Elvis, it honored him. It carried pain. Loss. Growth. Every late-night practice. Every tear by the shoreline. Every promise to his father. Halfway through the performance, something changed in the room. The crowd wasn't watching a contestant anymore. They were witnessing a transformation. The camera cut to Simon. For once, there was no smirk. No raised eyebrow. Just focus. Miguel hit the final high note, strong, unwavering, electric. Silence. 2 full seconds. Then the entire theater erupted. A standing ovation that seemed to shake the walls. Judges on their feet. Audience members wiping tears. Simon remained seated for a moment longer. Then he stood. Slowly. He walked toward the microphone. I remember you, Simon said quietly. And I remember telling you passion wasn't enough. He paused, scanning the cheering crowd. Tonight, you proved me wrong. The audience roared. You didn't just improve. You transformed. That, Simon continued, pointing toward Miguel, is what resilience looks like. Miguel's eyes filled, but this time he didn't fight the tears. Another judge reached forward and slammed the golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded from above, raining down like a storm of second chances. Miguel fell to his knees, hands covering his face as gold shimmered around him. In that moment, somewhere beyond the lights and cameras, he imagined his father smiling. Backstage interviews later revealed something even more powerful. When asked what changed him, Miguel said, "Failure didn't destroy me. It trained me." His performance went viral, this time for the right reasons. Headlines read, "Redemption done right. The comeback of the year." But beyond the views and shares, something deeper happened. Messages poured in from people around the world, people who had quit on their dreams. People who were afraid to try again. People who needed proof that rejection isn't the end. Miguel went on to reach the finals that season. Whether he won or not almost became irrelevant. Because the real victory wasn't the trophy. It was the return. It was stepping back onto the same stage that once rejected him and turning doubt into applause. It was proving that being laughed at doesn't define you, giving up does. And here's the truth this story leaves us with: everyone gets their red X moment. Everyone hears no at least once. But what separates ordinary stories from unforgettable ones is what happens next. Do you fold the jumpsuit and hide it under the bed? Or do you redesign it and walk back into the light? Miguel chose the light. If this story moved you even a little, imagine how many others need to hear it. Hit that like button so this message reaches someone who's about to give up. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories of resilience, comeback, and courage. Because sometimes the world laughs first, but it applauds last. And somewhere tonight, someone who once failed is quietly preparing their comeback. Maybe it's you. Do you take the embarrassment, the rejection, the sleepless nights replaying your mistakes over and over again, and turn them into fuel? Because here's what most people don't understand about comebacks: they're not built on talent alone. They're built on humiliation survived. On tears nobody saw. On practice sessions when nobody clapped. On choosing discipline when quitting would have been easier. Miguel could have stayed in Cebu. He could have blamed the judges. Blamed the audience. Blamed the language barrier. He could have told himself the world wasn't fair. Instead, he asked himself a harder question: what if they were right, and I just wasn't ready yet? That question changed everything. Growth begins the moment excuses end. Every morning before work, he trained his voice until his throat burned. Every evening after shifts, he studied performances not just of Elvis Presley, but of modern vocalists, stage legends, performers who commanded arenas without shouting. He stopped trying to sound like someone else and started understanding why Elvis moved people in the first place. It wasn't the costume. It wasn't the hair. It was conviction. And conviction cannot be faked. The second time he stood on the stage of America's Got Talent, he wasn't asking for approval. He was offering proof. Proof that failure is feedback. Proof that time plus effort equals transformation. Proof that the version of you who got rejected is not the final version of you. And when Simon Cowell stood up, slowly, almost reluctantly, it wasn't just a judge acknowledging improvement. It was a symbol of something bigger. The same man who once said passion isn't enough was now witnessing what happens when passion matures into skill. That moment wasn't about revenge. It was about evolution. Here's the part people don't talk about: most dreams die quietly. Not because they were impossible, but because someone got embarrassed once and never tried again. Don't let that be your story. Maybe your stage isn't television. Maybe it's a classroom. A business idea. A YouTube channel you're scared to start. A skill you keep postponing. A comeback you keep delaying. The question isn't, what if I fail again? The real question is, what if you don't? What if the second attempt is the one that changes everything? What if the version of you who walks back into the room is unrecognizable from the one who walked out? Miguel's story reminds us that time will pass anyway. 5 years will pass whether you train or not. Whether you try or not. Whether you hide or rise. So choose wisely. Choose growth over comfort. Choose practice over pride. Choose courage over commentary. Because somewhere out there is a stage waiting for your return. And one day, the same people who doubted you might just be the ones standing up. If this message hit you at the right time, don't scroll away. Like this video so it reaches someone who needs motivation tonight. Subscribe for more stories that push you forward when quitting feels easier. And in the comments, tell me one dream you refuse to give up on. Your comeback story hasn't ended. Maybe it hasn't even begun. Do you let one bad moment define your entire future? Do you allow one note of silence a voice that was meant to be heard? Do you let embarrassment become your identity? Because here's the truth most people avoid: the world will test you. Not once. Not twice. But repeatedly. It will ask, how badly do you want it? And it won't ask kindly. Miguel understood that after his first failure on America's Got Talent. The laughter online hurt more than the judges' critiques. The memes. The slow-motion clips of his cracked note. The comments saying, "Go back home." Those words echoed louder than any applause ever could. But pain has two purposes. It can either paralyze you, or prepare you. For months, he avoided music completely. The white jumpsuit inspired by Elvis Presley gathered dust. His pompadour hairstyle disappeared. He cut his hair short, as if trying to cut away the memory itself. Yet every time he passed by a karaoke bar in Cebu and heard someone singing an old Elvis classic, something inside him stirred. Not jealousy. Not regret. Calling. Dreams don't disappear. They wait. The turning point wasn't dramatic. There was no spotlight. No music swelling in the background. It was a simple night when Miguel watched his old audition alone on his phone. Instead of cringing, he studied it. He noticed where his breath control failed. Where nerves tightened his jaw. Where fear overpowered preparation. And instead of saying, "I'm not good enough," he said, "I wasn't ready." That difference changed his life. Being not good enough feels permanent. Being not ready yet feels temporary. So he trained like someone who knew his future self was watching. When he returned years later to stand once again before Simon Cowell, it wasn't to erase the past. It was to prove that the past had served a purpose. And when Simon stood slowly, thoughtfully, after Miguel's redemption performance, the applause wasn't just for a song. It was for endurance. It was for growth. It was for every person who has ever been underestimated. Here's what you need to understand: success isn't about never falling. It's about refusing to stay fallen. So I'll ask you again. Or do you stay down? Do you let fear win quietly? Or do you rise, rebuild, retrain, and return stronger than anyone expected? Because the comeback is always more powerful than the setback. Maybe you've been rejected. Maybe someone laughed at your idea. Maybe your first attempt failed publicly. Good. That means you've started. Most people never even step onto the stage of their dreams. You did. Now the only question left is whether you'll step back on it. If this story speaks to something inside you, don't ignore that feeling. Like this video so it reaches someone who's standing at the edge of giving up. Subscribe for more stories that remind you resilience is louder than rejection. Your red X moment is not your ending. It's your training ground. And somewhere in your future, there's a moment waiting where even your harshest critic will have nothing left to say. Not because you silenced them, but because your growth did dare to look at the same stage that once rejected you, and walk toward it anyway. Dare to let your hands shake but not your faith. Dare to believe that the version of you who failed was only the introduction, not the final chapter. Because here's something powerful most people miss: embarrassment fades. Regret doesn't. Miguel learned that the hard way after his first appearance on America's Got Talent. The red XS hurt. The comments hurt more. But what hurt the most was imagining a future where he never tried again. Years passed. He could have built a quiet, safe life. A stable job. No risks. No stages. No public judgment. Many would have called that mature. But deep down, he knew it wasn't maturity. It was fear wearing a responsible mask. So he chose something harder. He chose to improve. He studied breath control until he could hold a note without trembling. He trained his stage presence so silence no longer intimidated him. He reconnected with the music that inspired him, especially the timeless performances of Elvis Presley, but this time, he didn't try to copy. He tried to understand. Because imitation impresses briefly. Authenticity lasts. When he returned to face Simon Cowell again, he wasn't seeking revenge. He wasn't chasing validation. He was honoring growth. And growth changes everything. The audience felt it the moment he sang his first note. Not because it was louder. Not because it was flashier. But because it was fearless. Fearless doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you move forward anyway. Simon's silence after the performance said more than any critique ever could. For a man known for sharp words, that quiet pause was powerful. It meant transformation had happened. And here's why that matters for you. Your life may not have cameras or judges. But you have moments. Moments where you decide whether to shrink or stretch. Hide or heal. Quit or continue. So I'll ask you again. Or do you dare? Dare to start that project again. Dare to upload that video. Dare to apply one more time. Dare to train when nobody is watching. Because the truth is, second attempts are rarely about proving others wrong. They're about proving yourself right. Right for believing. Right for dreaming. Right for refusing to settle. Miguel's comeback wasn't magical. It was methodical. It was built on small, boring, consistent effort. And that's something anyone can do. Including you. So don't let one chapter convince you the story is over. Sometimes the most powerful part of the story is the return. If this message found you at the exact moment you needed it, don't ignore that. Like this video so it reaches someone else standing at the edge of quitting. Subscribe for more stories that remind you courage grows when you use it. Your dream is not asking for perfection. It's asking for persistence. And the stage? It's still there. Waiting. Or do you decide that this time will be different? Different not because the world suddenly becomes kinder. Different because you become stronger. After Miguel's first failure on America's Got Talent, he had two voices inside him. One said, "You embarrassed yourself." The other whispered, "You were brave enough to try." The louder voice almost won. He replayed the moment when Simon Cowell said passion wasn't enough. That sentence echoed in his mind for years. At first, it felt like a door slamming shut. But one night, sitting alone with his father's old vinyl records of Elvis Presley spinning softly in the background, he heard that sentence differently. Passion isn't enough. It wasn't an insult. It was instruction. Passion is the spark. But discipline is the fire. So Miguel stopped asking, "Why did they reject me?" He started asking, "How do I become undeniable?" He trained when he was tired. He practiced when no one clapped. He performed for 5 people with the same intensity he would give 5,000. Because greatness isn't built on big stages. It's built in small rooms. When he returned years later, something had shifted. His walk wasn't arrogant, but it was steady. His eyes didn't search for approval. They held purpose. And when he sang, the difference wasn't just technical. It was emotional maturity. Pain had shaped his tone. Loss had deepened his expression. Hard work had strengthened his control. That's why the silence in the auditorium felt different this time. It wasn't awkward. It was captivated. When Simon stood up slowly after the final note, it wasn't just a judge acknowledging talent. It was a symbol that growth changes perception. The same stage. The same dream. A completely different man. And here's the part that matters most. Miguel's story isn't powerful because he was rejected. It's powerful because he refused to let rejection make the final decision. So I'll ask you again. Or do you decide that this time will be different? Different because you'll prepare more. Different because you'll stay consistent. Different because you won't let one failure become your identity. Most people quit at the moment right before they would have improved. Don't be most people. Be the person who trains quietly. Be the person who grows privately. Be the person who returns unexpectedly. Because the comeback always feels longer than the setback, but it lasts much longer too. If this story lit something inside you, don't scroll past it. Like this video so someone else on the edge of quitting sees it tonight. Subscribe for more stories that remind you resilience beats regret every time. Your first attempt was a lesson. Your second attempt? That could be your legacy. Or do you refuse to let this be how your story ends? Because that's what it really comes down to. Not talent. Not luck. Not even opportunity. Decision. After Miguel walked off the stage of America's Got Talent the first time, humiliated and heartbroken, nobody would have blamed him if he disappeared. The world had seen him fail. The internet had laughed. Even Simon Cowell had looked unconvinced. But the real battle didn't happen under bright lights. It happened in the quiet. In the early mornings when doubt whispered louder than ambition. In the late nights when he questioned whether chasing a dream inspired by Elvis Presley was foolish for someone from a small neighborhood in Cebu. It happened when he stared at the folded white jumpsuit and asked himself, was that the best I'll ever be? And here's the truth. Everyone has a folded jumpsuit moment. A symbol of something we tried and failed at. A reminder of courage that didn't pay off. The easy choice is to leave it folded. The powerful choice is to unfold it again. Miguel didn't magically wake up confident. Confidence came after repetition. After discipline. After showing up for himself when nobody else was watching. He strengthened his voice, but more importantly, he strengthened his mind. Because the second time he stepped onto that stage, he wasn't trying to prove he was perfect. He was proving he had grown. Growth is quiet. Growth is uncomfortable. Growth is invisible until suddenly, it isn't. When Simon went silent after Miguel's comeback performance, that silence carried weight. For a man known for sharp critiques, speechlessness meant something extraordinary had happened. But here's what made the moment powerful. Miguel didn't need Simon's approval anymore. He had already approved of himself. That's the level most people never reach. They chase applause before they build ability. Miguel built ability first. So I'll ask you again. Or do you refuse to let this be your ending? Do you refuse to let one rejection define your worth? Do you refuse to let fear write the final paragraph? Because somewhere in your life, there is a stage waiting. Maybe it's not television. Maybe it's a business idea. A skill. A dream you paused. A goal you quietly buried after one bad experience. But it's still there. Waiting. The difference between people who inspire and people who regret isn't talent. It's return. Return after embarrassment. Return after loss. Return after doubt. If this message feels personal, that's because it is. You don't need a viral moment to validate you. You need commitment. So choose. Fold the jumpsuit forever. Or redesign it. If this story reminded you that your comeback is still possible, hit like so it reaches someone else who needs courage tonight. Subscribe for more stories about resilience, redemption, and refusing to quit. Because your first failure was not a verdict. It was preparation. And the next time you step forward, make sure it's stronger. Or do you refuse to let this be how your story ends? Because that's what it really comes down to. Not talent. Not luck. Not even opportunity. Decision. After Miguel walked off the stage of America's Got Talent the first time, humiliated and heartbroken, nobody would have blamed him if he disappeared. The world had seen him fail. The internet had laughed. Even Simon Cowell had looked unconvinced. But the real battle didn't happen under bright lights. It happened in the quiet. In the early mornings when doubt whispered louder than ambition. In the late nights when he questioned whether chasing a dream inspired by Elvis Presley was foolish for someone from a small neighborhood in Cebu. It happened when he stared at the folded white jumpsuit and asked himself, was that the best I'll ever be? And here's the truth. Everyone has a folded jumpsuit moment. A symbol of something we tried and failed at. A reminder of courage that didn't pay off. The easy choice is to leave it folded. The powerful choice is to unfold it again. Miguel didn't magically wake up confident. Confidence came after repetition. After discipline. After showing up for himself when nobody else was watching. He strengthened his voice, but more importantly, he strengthened his mind. Because the second time he stepped onto that stage, he wasn't trying to prove he was perfect. He was proving he had grown. Growth is quiet. Growth is uncomfortable. Growth is invisible until suddenly, it isn't. When Simon went silent after Miguel's comeback performance, that silence carried weight. For a man known for sharp critiques, speechlessness meant something extraordinary had happened. But here's what made the moment powerful. Miguel didn't need Simon's approval anymore. He had already approved of himself. That's the level most people never reach. They chase applause before they build ability. Miguel built ability first. So I'll ask you again. Or do you refuse to let this be your ending? Do you refuse to let one rejection define your worth? Do you refuse to let fear write the final paragraph? Because somewhere in your life, there is a stage waiting. Maybe it's not television. Maybe it's a business idea. A skill. A dream you paused. A goal you quietly buried after one bad experience. But it's still there. Waiting. The difference between people who inspire and people who regret isn't talent. It's return. Return after embarrassment. Return after loss. Return after doubt. If this message feels personal, that's because it is. You don't need a viral moment to validate you. You need commitment. So choose. Fold the jumpsuit forever. Or redesign it. If this story reminded you that your comeback is still possible, hit like so it reaches someone else who needs courage tonight. Subscribe for more stories about resilience, redemption, and refusing to quit. Because your first failure was not a verdict. It was preparation. And the next time you step forward, make sure it's stronger. Or do you bet on yourself? Not when it's easy. Not when people clap. But when nobody believes you can win. That was the real turning point in Miguel's life after his first heartbreak on America's Got Talent. The red excess were public. The embarrassment was loud. And when Simon Cowell said, "Passion isn't enough," it felt final. But what if it wasn't final? What if it was a challenge disguised as criticism? For months, Miguel avoided music. He told himself he was being practical, responsible, realistic. But deep down, every time he heard an old song by Elvis Presley, something inside him tightened, not with pain, but with unfinished business. That feeling never went away. And here's something powerful: the dream that keeps coming back is the one you're meant to chase. Betting on yourself doesn't mean you're guaranteed to win. It means you refuse to sit out. It means you train when results are invisible. It means you accept that embarrassment is temporary, but regret can last a lifetime. When Miguel returned to the same stage years later, the world saw a transformation. His voice was stronger. His presence calmer. His confidence steady. But what they didn't see were the mornings he practiced before sunrise. The nights he doubted himself and still showed up. The days he wanted to quit and didn't. Success looked sudden. It wasn't. It was built. And when Simon stood in silence after that final note, the applause wasn't just for a performance. It was for persistence. For the courage to return. For the decision to bet on himself even when the odds weren't in his favor. So I'll ask you again. Or do you bet on yourself? Do you invest in your growth instead of your excuses? Do you choose discipline over comfort? Do you keep going long enough for improvement to become undeniable? Because here's the truth. Nobody claps for the first attempt. They clap for the comeback. They clap for the growth. They clap for the person who refused to disappear. Maybe your stage is small right now. Maybe your audience is tiny. Maybe your progress feels slow. Keep going. Because 5 years will pass anyway. The only question is, will you be 5 years stronger or 5 years regretful? If this story hit home, don't just feel inspired, act inspired. Like this video so someone else finds it at the right moment. Subscribe for more stories that push you forward when quitting feels easier. And tonight, ask yourself honestly. Are you waiting for permission? Or are you ready to bet on yourself?